This is the story of how a 20-year campaign to secure ultimate constitutional permanence was quietly dismantled in the absolute silence of a palace corridor. In less than 48 hours, a single heavy fountain pen stroke transformed Queen Camilla's crowning, legal masterpiece, into the definitive instrument of her total isolation. What transpired behind the encrypted security walls of the Privy Council was not a public scandal or a volatile family dispute. It was a cold, clinical execution of constitutional governance. What Camilla just realized behind the closed doors of her private study is that the crown on her head carries no legal weight when matched against the unyielding defense of the sovereign bloodline. When a Queen Consort's custom-drafted amendments to a sovereign succession decree are quietly expunged without her knowledge, it is never an administrative oversight. It is a calculated declaration of institutional containment, and the message delivered to her by Prince William was chillingly absolute. You do not control the future. You cannot dictate the terms of the transition. And against the ancient generational memory of the bloodline, you actually own absolutely nothing. In this video, we are going to unpack the secret constitutional power grab that triggered one of the most ruthless and silent internal containment strategies the modern monarchy has ever witnessed. We will examine the hidden paper trail Camilla created when she attempted to manipulate the 2026 royal decree, a desperate high-stakes maneuver to secure a permanent co-regency status and ensure her family's untouchable standing before the inevitable transition of the crown. We will look at exactly how Prince William and Princess Anne, operating with forensic precision within the Cabinet Office, uncovered her staggering institutional overreach. Finally, we will break down the silent, bureaucratic guillotine that severed her political influence the moment she attempted to overwrite the sovereign bloodline. This is a masterclass in high-stakes institutional warfare, where the most devastating retaliations are delivered not through the press, but through a locked council door, exposing a woman who just discovered that the illusion of supreme authority is no match for the cold reality of constitutional security. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of this structural collapse, we must first look at the towering illusion of supremacy Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously constructing. For 30 years, she operated with a singular, unyielding focus, navigating her way from the deep shadows of the monarchy's greatest public scandal to the glittering apex of the British social hierarchy. But behind the heavy diamond tiaras and the highly polished public relations campaigns, her psychological objective was never merely about gaining public acceptance. It was about achieving absolute institutional permanence. Over the decades, we witnessed what appeared to be the systematic, quiet erasure of Princess Diana's legacy. Camilla oversaw the gradual replacement of traditional courtiers with her own loyalists, the subtle shifting of physical portraits within the palaces, and the consistent, aggressive push to elevate her non-royal children into the permanent fabric of the court. She operated under the profound, unwavering belief that because she held total control over the heart and decisions of King Charles, she inherently wielded the executive authority to reshape the constitutional narrative of the crown itself. She mistook the king's personal devotion for unyielding sovereign power. Throughout the transition of the current reign, she navigated her elevated position with a staggering level of confidence, building an empire of influence surrounded by an expensive public relations apparatus. This echo chamber convinced her that the public had forgotten the past, that the physical evidence of her predecessor had been successfully buried, and that the institution was finally hers to rule. She believed she had outlasted the ghost of Diana. She believed she'd won the long game. But what she failed to comprehend is that the British monarchy protects its bloodline with cold. Generational memory and the illusion of power can evaporate in a single day. The trigger for this unprecedented internal war occurred during a highly classified, palace-wide initiative to finalize the long-term legal contingencies of the reign. As the reality of King Charles's ongoing health vulnerabilities settled over the household, the Cabinet Office and the Privy Council began drafting the 2026 Sovereign Authority and Regency Decree. This highly sensitive state document was designed to streamline the constitutional transition of duties, ensuring absolute operational stability for the government. For Camilla, this decree represented a terrifying countdown to her own institutional irrelevance. But it also presented a final, unmissable opportunity. Recognizing the inherent fragility of a consort's position, she was gripped by what can only be described as a sophisticated form of commercial and political desperation. She knew that the moment King Charles is no longer on the throne, her institutional currency drops to absolute zero, leaving her entirely at the mercy of the future king. Driven by this survival panic, Camilla attempted a breathtaking secret administrative maneuver. She sought to quietly exploit the transitional adjustments within the Privy Council drafts. Behind closed doors, she directed her private legal advisors to insert a series of highly complex, altered clauses into the appendix of the decree. The hidden paper trail revealed an extraordinary attempt at institutional overreach. Camilla's office attempted to legally mandate a permanent advisory role for herself during any future regency, effectively attempting to position herself as a co-regent with veto power over palace administrative appointments. Furthermore, she sought to secure independent state-funded trust provisions that would guarantee her non-royal children permanent diplomatic status and lifelong residential rights within the sovereign estates. It was a calculated attempt to turn a routine constitutional update into a personal corporate fortress, utilizing her proximity to the ailing monarch to slip a parallel court into the permanent law of the state. What Camilla did not anticipate was that the administrative machinery she was attempting to manipulate was no longer vulnerable to her influence. While she was busy executing her strategy through the household offices, Prince William and Princess Anne were quietly protecting the perimeter. As the heir apparent, William had recently taken absolute oversight of the Crown's internal infrastructure and the modernisation of its constitutional frameworks. William is a man who carries the silent, enduring grief of his mother's public humiliation. Coupled with a fierce, unwavering instinct to protect his wife, Catherine, he has watched Catherine offer nothing but uncomplaining sacrifice and flawless execution of duty, maintaining her grace under immense pressure. For William and Anne, the 2026 royal decree was a sacred constitutional trust, not a personal inheritance to be divided among step family loyalists. When Camilla's unauthorized amendments were routed through the Central Chancery for formatting, they did not just bypass standard review. They triggered an immediate, highly classified administrative alert that landed directly on the desks of the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal. The forensic discovery of her master plan was born out of a cold, analytical process. William and Anne conducted a silent audit of the draft registry. They tracked the precise metadata trail of the text edits directly back to the authorization codes of Camilla's private office. They saw the precise, calculated attempt to permanently dilute the authority of the rightful bloodline and the aggressive strategy to elevate the Parker Bowles network. The moral outrage was profound, but in the upper echelons of the British monarchy, you do not retaliate with emotional screaming matches or leaked tabloid stories. You retaliate with weaponized restraint. The execution of their revenge was completely silent, turning the very rules of protocol into a clinical guillotine. William did not confront his stepmother in the drawing rooms of the palace. He simply activated his absolute authority over the royal estate's operational frameworks, while Princess Anne utilized her structural positioning within the Privy Council governance committees. A strict internal directive was quietly issued, completely expunging every single one of Camilla's unauthorized clauses from the final state document, every legal edit, every financial provision, and every title expansion her team had attempted was instantly rolled back to its original historically accurate state. The trap snapped shut on the precise morning of the formal signing ceremony. Camilla arrived at the palace executive suite, flanked by her private advisors. Fully expecting to witness the execution of her ultimate historical triumph, she expected the heavy oak doors of the Privy Council chamber to swing open, granting her the absolute authority she had spent decades engineering. Instead, as she approached the threshold, she was met by a devastating visual humiliation. The specialized security detail guarding the chamber stepped forward, forming a physical blockade. Her personal digital access fob, the electronic key she used to command her empire, was completely deactivated. The scanner flashed a brilliant, unforgivable red. The head of the Constitutional Secretariat politely informed her that, under new administrative directives from the Office of the Prince of Wales, her presence was not required. The 2026 Royal Decree had already been finalised and signed hours earlier, completely stripped of her amendments. She was instructed to leave the main corridor and use a secondary side door to exit the building, isolated from the state officials. Camilla stood completely frozen in the suffocating silence of the hallway, staring at the closed doors that contained her dismantled future, realizing with a terrifying clarity that the trap had just snapped shut. The red glow of the deactivated scanner remained burned into Camilla's vision, as she retreated from the locked council doors, the heavy silence of the palace corridor pressing in around her. The absolute revocation of her administrative access was not an IT glitch or a temporary misunderstanding. It was a constitutional eviction executed in the shadows. Driven by the sheer panic of her exposed vulnerability, she bypassed the frozen communication channels of her private office and sought an immediate urgent audience with King Charles. In her mind, the core dynamic of their 30-year relationship remained her ultimate shield. She presented the locked council room, the expunged clauses, and the clinical intervention of the Prince of Wales not merely as a personal insult, but as a direct challenge to the King's sovereign authority. She fully expected the man who had fractured his relationship with the public and altered the trajectory of the monarchy for her sake to summon the cabinet secretaries, overrule his heir, and force the system to reinstate her legal provisions. But that is where the narrative shifts completely, not because of a grand dramatic argument, but because of a devastating, unyielding silence. As Camilla finished her frantic plea, King Charles did not reach for his secure telephone to issue a royal countermand. He did not summon his legal advisors to draft a sovereign override. Instead, he met his wife with a heavy, agonizing silence that carried the absolute weight of a transitioning reign. This was the profound, calculated concession of a monarch who had just been forced to face the harsh, constitutional reality of his own mortality. Charles understands what Camilla refuses to accept. The infrastructure of the future no longer belongs to him. By refusing to intervene, the king quietly validated the administrative guillotine that William and Princess Anne had dropped, signalling to the entire palace apparatus that the true governing authority had already shifted to the Prince of Wales. In that quiet room, Charles chose the survival of the bloodline over the ambitions of his consort, leaving Camilla to face the terrifying realization that her ultimate protector had just stepped aside. This devastating silence exposes the raw, fragile underbelly of what can only be described as Camilla's profound commercial and political desperation. To the outside world, she projects the glittering image of an untouchable matriarch riding in state carriages and wearing the historic crown jewels. But the cold economic and constitutional reality of the British monarchy is that she actually owns absolutely nothing. A consort holds no independent royal wealth, and her access to the grand palaces and multi-billion-dollar sovereign estates is strictly a temporary lease tied entirely to the lifetime of her husband. Her secret attempt to manipulate the 2026 royal decree was a panicked, calculated maneuver to build a legally binding, state-subsidized fortress for her family before the inevitable transition of the crown. She knew that the moment King Charles is no longer on the throne, her institutional currency drops to absolute zero, leaving her family completely exposed to the financial grace and favor of King William V. William's decision to execute a forensic audit and permanently strike her clauses from the state record was a masterclass in institutional containment. He weaponized the bureaucracy of the state to lay bare her financial vulnerability, proving that the sovereign's future authority cannot be carved up and distributed as party favors to a shadow court. This internal reckoning represents the ultimate restoration of the true order, vindicating the enduring legacy of Princess Diana. For years, William has watched the quiet, systematic attempts to minimize his mother's memory and rewrite the historical narrative of the court. By fiercely guarding the 2026 royal decree and locking Camilla out of the future regency framework, William protected his mother's ghost from being permanently overwritten by the architect of her greatest sorrow, proving that the constitutional memory of the institution belongs exclusively to the bloodline. This defensive strike stands in stark contrast to the quiet, unshakable power of Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Catherine does not need to deploy private legal advisors, manipulate appendix clauses, or engineer secret administrative overrides to secure her place in history. Her power is rooted in uncomplaining sacrifice, flawless execution of duty, and the absolute legitimacy of the sovereign bloodline as the mother of the future king. The institution knows exactly where the true authority lies, and the broader household has already recognized this seismic shift. Palace courtiers, cabinet clerks, and media strategists who possess an exquisite radar for the true axis of power have already begun shifting their allegiances entirely toward Prince William and Catherine, realizing that aligning with Camilla's private territorial ambitions is now a fast track to institutional exile. What viewers and royal insiders will notice in the coming months are the subtle, undeniable shifts in the palace's operational footprint. The grand narrative of Camilla's undisputed supremacy will quietly fade. From official state channels, her private projects will face sudden, unexplained bureaucratic delays, and her presence at core constitutional briefings will be completely erased. The story of the dismantled 2026 royal decree resonates far beyond the heavy stone walls of the palace because it validates a fundamental truth about royal power. It demonstrates that the ancient organism of the British monarchy cannot be permanently hollowed out by clever public relations, nor can its future be hijacked through emotional manipulation. As the grand illusion vanished, Camilla was left trapped behind a digital and legal side door, facing the cold reality of a consort who was merely a temporary guest in a house she sought to rule. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics and shifting protocols of the British monarchy. If you found this forensic analysis compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below with your thoughts on Prince William and Princess Anne's decisive administrative retaliation. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the unspoken truths behind the palace walls.